Hello, friends, and welcome back to Malicious Compliance Stories. Why do people think they get whatever they want? Probably because it's worked before, or maybe that's the way they grew up. Yeah, when Karen throws a fit at a supermarket or a restaurant, 90% of the time the manager will let her have her way to get her out of there and make the customer happy, so she assumes this will work for everything. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you're new here, and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. Here we go. Entitled mom thinks her family is entitled to my balcony. So my SO and I live in a high-rise downtown Chicago. The way our building is set up, only the corner units get balconies and the rest just have windows you can open. These balconies are 100% private and part of your unit. I pay for this, and it's great being able to go outside and not have another person sitting just to the left of me. Our neighbors, who were an elderly couple, moved out in April, and the unit's been bought by a family of 3. The kid's about 3 and so far has been pretty quiet, or at least we can't hear her through the walls. Anyway, last night I was coming in from the basement storage area with my dog and our small grill because it's finally warm enough to cook outside and enjoy it. The mom was in the hall and asked where I was going with the grill, as it was a fire hazard inside, and I mentioned my balcony. Well, that's when she instantly begins her tirade about not being able to get to any of the public balconies on the floor. She'd been trying all corner doors and all were locked, mine included. Now, mind you, this is maybe the 3rd time I've met this woman. She's lived here for about 2 months now and has been trying to get into our apartment to use the balcony. Our door's always locked. It's locked the second one of us gets home and stays locked. I tell her that the only public balcony type space is the roof deck, and she yells at me. Says in her contract she has a balcony she can use and demands to let her use mine. I just laughed and I point at my neighbor across the hall who's coming home. He has another of the 4 balconies and stops to say hi amidst her yelling at me. She asks who he is, and he says her other neighbor across from me, and she goes into the same crap with him. We both explain to her that no, she has no such thing in her contract or lease, and if she has an issue, to go talk with the door staff and ask them, or go to the management. She got mad and went inside at that point, and my across-the-hall neighbor and I just laughed about it and talked about the new Zelda game coming out. And our second story. All items on the conveyor belt? I'd love to. Happened today at a club/membership warehouse retailer. The newly appointed floor manager, of course we'll call her Karen, in between berating her staff and hissing at customers who mess up the way their goods are displayed and merchandised. She accosted my son for unfolding a Lakers hoodie, then not folding it back up perfectly. Was asking rather loudly, all items must be placed on top of conveyor belt for easy, quick, and efficient checkout. My son and I look at each other. We then carefully place the boxed 60-inch OLED 4K HD TV on top of the conveyor belt. We had to place the box in a Tate mode orientation in order for it to fit, as the belt wasn't long enough. We could tell from the smirk on her face that the checkout gal knew what we were doing, as she pretended not to have noticed and continued helping the customer ahead of us. Belt jerks forward with its usual sudden start and stop motion. Box TV makes a loud thud as it makes impact with the polished concrete floor. Floor manager and store manager run over asking what happened. My son speaks before I could. Karen here instructed everyone to place all items on top of the conveyor belt for easy, quick, and efficient checkout. I just didn't want her to yell at me again like she did earlier at the sports apparel section. Karen is beet red with her forehead veins popping out and throbbing at this point. Lovely checkout gal interjects to the store manager, sorry, I didn't notice the TV on the conveyor belt as I was helping the elderly customer ahead range her shopping cart. We only have ourselves to blame, as we've been telling everyone all morning that all items must be on the belt. Son and I carry on with the checkout process after getting a replacement TV. On our way out, the receipt checker says, not all heroes wear capes. We needed someone to do something like this, as he winked at us. That TV died for Karen's sins. And our last story. $50,000 collector cars are eyesores to HOA. Okay, so I've been dealing with this for the last 3 months, and it has finally reached its climax. For a little backstory, I own a towing company and am currently renting a home within an HOA I was not informed of when I signed the lease. My wife and I broke ground on our dream home days before lockdown went into effect. We signed a 2-year lease as we were offered a $250 reduction in rent if we did. The house has a 3-car garage attached to it, as well as parking for an additional 2 cars in the driveway. I keep my tow truck in the driveway or parked on the street in front of the house as it's classified as an emergency vehicle by the state and not merely a commercial vehicle. This means it's not against the HOA to have it in the neighborhood. We also own many cars as all 3 people living in the home are car nuts. Now we do not keep that all at home, but we do have a total of 6 cars at home plus the tow truck, which means 2 vehicles are always parked on the street. For reference, the cars we keep at home are 1. A 1967 4-door Chevy Impala, 2. 1967 Ford Galaxy, 3. 1993 Mazda RX-7, 4. 1994 Nissan Silvia, 5. 2013 Subaru BRZ, 6. 2008 BMW M3. Of these cars, all of the imports have wide body kits that cost between $4 and $12 grand. This is important as to value of vehicles as well as looks. Look up Rocket Bunny and Liberty Walk to get an idea of what they look like. Okay, now for the story. After living here for just over 9 months and as the lockdowns were ending, the world opened its weary eyes just to get punched in the face again. The HOA that we had absolutely no idea existed started by ticketing the tow truck, which is parked on the street, stating that it cannot be parked on the street. Okay, I'll put it in the driveway, no problem. Pay the $150 fine to the HOA after getting the contract from the landlord and reading it. I figure it's best to just go along with it and not ruffle any feathers. By moving the tow truck into the driveway, I started parking the RX-7 on the street. The 2 classic cars are kept in the garage, as well as the BRZ, as it's my project car, and I'm in the middle of building a very high-end drift car out of it. The other 2 people in my house drive the BMW and Nissan every day. The very next day, I return home and there are tickets on both the RX-7 and the Silvia, which are parked on the street by our driveway. Numerous neighbors are also parked on the street, mind you, without tickets from the HOA. I immediately call the a-hole in charge of the HOA to ask what the hell is going on. A-hole, tells me that our junk is devaluing the neighborhood and cannot be parked on the streets, and cites a rule in the HOA guidelines about vehicles being in disrepair or essentially a junk status needing to be put in the garage. I laughed, full-on gut chuckle. The guy I'm talking to drives an early 2000s Cadillac that's maybe worth $10K. AH tells me if the vehicles continue to be parked on the street, he'll have them towed. Okay, let's play. I told AH that he needs to read his own manual and look at the vehicles he's talking about. Nissan Silvia is also parked on the street. Clearly, both cars are not in disarray. AH, 10 days after the initial ticketing, calls for a tow truck, and this is where I should mention that the reason my tow truck is listed as an emergency vehicle is because my company has the county police contract for their towing, as well as the township. When Small Guy Towing shows up to impound my vehicles, I'm not home. I get a call from SG that he's been sent to impound my cars. We know each other from the businesses we operate, and I often kick him work when we're holding over a 90-minute ETA to not upset customers. SG tells me he has to tow my cars due to his contract with the HOA, but he doesn't have a truck that can tow these lowered cars without damaging them. SG asked me to come home and remove the bumpers so they'll go on his truck. I told SG that it wasn't going to happen, and I hate to look for other guy towing to send overflow work while we see how the courts feel about the impounding and potential damages to cars. SG wisely decides to not tow the vehicles. Now, this was October of 2020. Since then, SG has called me dozens of times about AH calling him repeatedly to tow the vehicles, SG telling AH that the only company in the area that can tow these vehicles is my company. Finally, on July 5th, AH calls my company to impound my cars. Okay, no problem. I send 3 of my guys over in the shop pickup to drive my cars back to the shop where they were parked and kept for the last month. The wife started driving the Impala regularly as it's summer. Friday, we went to small claims court as I sued the HOA for towing costs, $250 per vehicle, as well as storage on each vehicle, $62 per day each, and an additional $3,000 for inconveniences due to not having the cars for daily transportation. Add on an additional $1,500 for lawyer fees. After roughly 5 minutes, the judge asks for photos from AH of the cars. AH gives the judge photos. The judge comments on how nice the cars are and they're clearly not in disarray. I thank the judge and ask him if he can see the Cadillac parked on the street way in the background of the photo, as well as the other 5 or 6 cars in frame. The judge affirms this and asks AH about these cars. AH states that these are not in violation and even coughs up that the Cadillac is his car. The judge smiles a toothy grin and confesses to being the car guy and estimates that each of the 2 cars that have been impounded are worth $50,000 each, and that AH's Cadillac would clearly be the eyesore of the community. The judge then dismisses the HOA's claims and explicitly tells AH that he is not to tow any vehicles out of the neighborhood without police confirmation of their disarray or abandonment. Judge goes further and states that the HOA is in violation of the township ordinance as the streets are not private streets but belong to the township. The judge then grabs what I assume is a calculator and starts punching away. After about a minute and a half of pure silence, the judge looks up and says, "Okay, as stated before, AH's claim for the HOA has been dismissed. As for OP's countersuit, I will rule in favor in the amount of $10,100 and $65.50 in court costs to AH's HOA." AH lost his freaking mind. AH went on a rant about communism, about how the judge was the problem with this country, and into election conspiracies and every whack job theory you hear from people like Alex Jones. The judge warned AH twice and finally ordered him in contempt and invited him to have a weekend stay on the county's dime at the local jail. AH will be home tonight as the judge set to release him at 6 p.m. The cars are back in their original spots, and I cannot wait for the hand-wave and grin as AH comes home this evening. Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.